This is Horror Stories.
The Ghost Tenant.
The events I'm about to recount took place a few years ago. I was a young man who had just finished his bachelor's degree and had landed his first job. I was finally starting to be independent from my family and had a bit of money to consider looking for an apartment. Along with my partner, we had been searching through some real estate agencies, but it wasn't easy. There were apartments that we really liked, but they were beyond the budgets we were working with, and we couldn't afford them. We also saw others that were really strange, old buildings with room layouts that would be unimaginable nowadays. We had already made a bunch of visits to see what would be our supposed home for some time until something interesting appeared. We lived in a small coastal town, and the building where the apartment was located was right on the beachfront, a big plus. Furthermore, it was one of the cheapest we had found so far, so apparently it could be a good option. We called the agency, scheduled an appointment, and went to see it. It was just as described in the ad, beachfront. From the windows, you could see the sea and the urban beaches that the city had. It was also in a fairly lively area with restaurants and entertainment areas. On the other hand, the building was old, although not as much as others in the older part of the city. It didn't have an elevator, but that wasn't much of a problem because it only had 2 floors. The apartment was on the first floor. On each floor, there were 2 apartments facing each other. To reach ours, there was nothing remarkable or out of the ordinary. A lobby, some stairs leading up to the second floor, where the 2 apartment doors corresponding to that floor were. The stairs ended there. Now, I'll try to describe our first impressions. The access was through a normal door. Not very sturdy, to be honest. It wasn't armored or anything like that. When you crossed the threshold, 2 steps ahead there was a new door, and 2 more, one on each side. We were told that the side doors belonged to a division that had been made of the floor but was not rented out. Therefore, the entrance door was the door right in front of us. Another lock and another key. Despite not having a reinforced door, we had 2 doors to access. Ha ha ha. It seemed like a new security system. Once inside, we entered a hallway that led to a narrow kitchen on the right, which seemed like a continuation of the hallway itself, and on the left, it extended until it ended in a room with windows facing the beach. In the middle of the hallway, towards the room, there was a door on the right where there was an interior room, and 2 doors on the left for the bathroom and the main bedroom. To make the layout clear, you can see a small sketch in the image. What we saw was nothing out of this world, but it was cheap, and the views incredible. It was summer, and you could hear people having fun on the beach. Of course, it convinced us. The following week, we were already settled in. We lived there quietly for about 18 months without any incidents worth mentioning. Visits from friends or family always reminded us how curious the entry system was, but we were already used to it and didn't notice it in our daily lives. We were in the middle of winter when a strong storm hit, causing an incident in the house. It turns out that the kitchen led to a terrace that was also separated from the other part of the apartment. The lack of maintenance in the other part caused the water not to drain properly to the sewer, and that led to a flood that entered through the terrace door that was always closed. We noticed one day when we were about to leave the house in the morning, and the area between the doors was completely flooded, and the water was seeping in through the entrance door. The next step was to call the real estate agency to solve the problem. They showed up in the afternoon with the keys and a maintenance person to check the origin of the flood and the damages. The first thing was to open the door on the right. I was surprised to see that there was a kitchen practically identical to ours. The floor was completely flooded, and we confirmed that the water was coming in from the terrace. The terrace, of course, had the drain totally clogged with garbage and dust that had been accumulating for years. Cleaning it properly would probably prevent further floods for a good while. Once that was solved, the next step was to remove all the water that had entered. From our side, not much had come in, and we cleaned it quickly. Cleaning the area where the water had presumably entered under the left door was still pending. The first sign that something strange was happening was when none of the keys the real estate agent brought fit into the lock. In fact, he called the owners to confirm that he had all the keys and also to ask if the lock had been changed since then. The keys were all there, and supposedly no one had changed the lock. The solution was to call a locksmith to open it. When he arrived, it was already late in the evening and it was pitch dark. I don't know if you've ever seen a locksmith work, but they usually work incredibly fast. Well, in this case, it was taking him a while. Supposedly, it was an unusual high security lock. Quite odd for a door in a building like that. Finally, he managed to open it. By that time, there was a lot of curiosity and expectation on my part to know what was hidden behind that door. And it didn't disappoint anyone. The first thing we noticed was that the entrance switch didn't work. The second thing, the smell was much denser and heavier, although it didn't smell bad, just stuffy. The real estate agent was the first to enter to look for another switch. He found one about 5 steps ahead, turned it on, and the light came on, but it only flooded the back of the room. From where we were, there was still darkness. The water had seeped in about halfway, more or less, but that was something that stopped interesting everyone who was there. As for me, I didn't expect the supposed room to be so spacious. It had a window that also faced the beach, which had the shutter down, and of course, I had always seen it down from the outside. There were several pieces of furniture and closets, but the first thing I noticed was a high-end refrigerator. It wasn't doing anything, no noise. At the back of the room, there was a large freezer of the same brand, totally silent. Both were working. In one of the corners, I spotted something that chilled me to the bone. Surely you've seen, in movies, the typical surveillance camera panel. Well, I was seeing something that looked a lot like it. Too much. They were turned off, but all this was starting to give me a very bad feeling. And then, someone let out a scream of terror. The real estate agent had opened the refrigerator. Inside, where there could supposedly be yogurt, cheese, or fruit, there were human remains. It was so shocking that from here on, I have blurry memories. What will never be erased from my mind is that the first thing I saw was a hand, and the next thing was the head placed right next to it. We got out of there. None of us who were there wanted to spend any more time inside the room. Someone called the police, and a few minutes later, they were already inspecting the apartment. They found human remains belonging to more than 10 different people, distributed between the refrigerator and the freezer. Some were recent from the subsequent analysis they carried out. It was a huge nightmare, and the worst was yet to come. They discovered what the cameras I had seen turned off were watching. The building was completely controlled by those cameras. The lobby, the entrance of the first door, the area between both doors, and our apartment. Each and every room we had been watched at all times by a serial killer. My blood ran cold. Logically, we didn't spend another night there. Years have passed, but wherever I go, I check every corner for hidden rooms, walls with double bottoms, hidden cameras that may watch my movements. The police investigations led nowhere. The author of the murders was never found. We never saw or heard anything during the time we lived there. A chill runs down my spine just thinking about it. Who could have guessed that I was living with a ghost tenant who was also a serial killer? He could be anywhere, being just as stealthy and committing the same acts again. His secret only came to light due to an incident derived from a storm. Watch your back.